This is Ian Noel Camalotis for Entertainment Media, and this is Chatterbox. Hello, everybody. Again, my name is Ian Camalotis for Entertainment Media, and welcome to the first episode of a new show that I'm doing, more of a podcast show called Chatterbox Podcast. And just to tell you a little bit about Entertainment Media, it's a channel that I started up on YouTube where I have a few shows in terms of going to events, interviewing people, and more things that I'm looking forward to doing in the future. But why I wanted to start up the Chatterbox podcast is a chance for me to be able to talk about a lot of different topics that I like to talk about in TV, movie, video games, events that I've gone to, but also gives me a little bit another of a platform to be able to present some of these experiences with audiences. And the reason why I chose to call this Chatterbox is it's actually going to be kind of modeled off of my show Chatterbox, which I have on YouTube and various other media outlets. And Chatterbox is essentially a show where I interview different guests to get to know them and be able to learn about their craft, see what makes them passionate about that particular craft that they do, learn a little bit about some of the things to get into it, and also what advice they have for those who are looking to get into that field. But with the Chatterbox podcast, it gives me a chance to talk about some things also by myself as well, just to share some experiences and discuss a few things as well. Now, don't know what the schedule will be yet for this. I'm looking forward to at least hoping to do a couple episodes per month, if not something a little bit more. I don't know. I don't know what to expect. One of the things that brought me to doing this is I've had equipment issues this past year when it comes to show videotaping or recording my shows, but also the same token, the fact that we've gone through this global pandemic that's still stretching into now, it's limited opportunities to go to events, and I do have limitations also as well as travel and whatnot. So this will give me a chance to continue to connect with the audience with a few things and be able to present a few more things that we can discuss or things that might be looking forward to in the future. What I love about my show Chatterbox that I do is being able to interview a lot of these guests. And one of the places I love doing the show Chatterbox at is the event that I'm going to be talking about here, the Chicago International Film Festival. Now, I've only gone to 2 events this year, and in the past, actually 2 years now, due to the global pandemic. So it's nice to be able to bring some of this experience to you guys. Now, one of the other shows that I have is Here At. That show is more of bringing the event to everyone through visuals and everything, so you won't have that as part of this podcast here. I might talk about the event here on the Chatterbox podcast, but this will be primarily more discussing and sharing thoughts as well as interviewing people. So I'm looking forward to this, and let's actually get started with the event that we're talking about, the Chicago International Film Festival. So let's talk about the 57th Chicago International Film Festival. This is the 57th year of the Chicago International Film Festival, which is still the longest running competitive film festival in North America. This year it ran from October 13th through the 24th, which is a little bit shorter than what I've experienced most of the years that I've gone to it, which is about 2 weeks previously. This year they were at different locations, multiple locations, which happens from time to time. The locations involved AMC River East in downtown Chicago, which is the primary venue to see most of the films at the Chicago International Film Festival. They used a music box theater around the Lakeview Wrigleyville neighborhood area of Chicago to show some of the big Hollywood films and some of the red carpet ceremonies as well as having a red carpet ceremonies at the AMC River East Theater. They used the Gene Siskel Film Center, also downtown, for some of the other films. And then they also used the Chicago or the Chi-Town Movies Drive-In in the Pilsen area of Chicago for some of the other films as well, to give film goers a chance to see some of the films in drive-in form. This year they also included the opportunity to be able to see and screen some of the films through streaming services, which they started up last year, especially given how the pandemic has affected the film festival itself. Now, to talk a little bit about some of the experiences I've had with the Chicago International Film Festival, I've been covering this film festival since 2009, so at this moment it's about 12 years. And I've always had a great experience because going to the Chicago International Film Festival, it got me a chance to see some of the films before their Hollywood release. Gave me a chance to see some indie films, some films from other countries that you would not normally see here that aren't considered big blockbuster or Hollywood type films. So it gave me another perspective of other countries in terms of how they film their movies, what's important to them in their film going experience, and in terms of the stories they like to tell, which was a great thing to experience. Over the years, I've seen films from different parts of Asia, from Africa, from the Middle East, from Europe, from North America, South America, so many different films that it's made me appreciate being able to see a lot of these films. One of the things that I always got out of it too was being able to interview some of the guests. Now, these past couple of years, due to some equipment issues as well as the ongoing pandemic, I've been limited in terms of being able to attend the festival in person. So, being able to at least still see some of the films and learn a little bit about them has been great. And this podcast is going to give me a chance and opportunity to be able to talk to more people and get to know a little bit more about the stories behind the films. And especially if I'm not able to see them in person, it gives me opportunity to meet them and speak to them outside of the in-person experience. Now, if you want to learn a little bit more about the Chicago International Film Festival and Cinema Chicago as a whole, you can always check them out at the website www.chicagofilmfestival.com just to learn a little bit more about the programs they have, a lot of the experience to be able to see films for free, as well as learning more about the film festival, which they also have the Cine Youth, which they also have as part of the film festival a chance for kids to compete creating their own films as well. This has been a festival that has brought so many different people together. My experiences at the Chicago International Film Festival, actually in attendance, especially what I've heard from friends and family who've come with me, is the fact that when you go there, it's a little bit different movie experience because you're in line with people who are looking to see a film. They may be familiar with the director, they may be familiar a little bit with the culture if it's from their country, but nobody knows what to expect from the films, and people like to just discuss what their thoughts, their feelings are before and after the film. At times there are chances to have Q&As with any of the filmmakers or actors that are in attendance for the screening of their film, and it's something that's very unique and positive when it comes to being able to see both the film and hear other people's perspectives when they ask questions of the filmmakers and actors, but also hear the perspective and the actors and the filmmakers who create the film and are there to tell a little bit more about the film. It's a great experience to be able to also voice your opinions because they always have surveys at the end. What are your thoughts on the film? Did you like it? Did you not like it? And then surveys that ask what else would you like to look for in the future for the Chicago International Film Festival. I'm glad that they're still going strong. I'm looking forward to what they have next year, but I do want to talk about some of the films that they screened this year and a little bit about how I felt the films made me feel, what are the things I liked about it, what I didn't like about them. And interestingly enough, you're going to see based on these rankings, some of these films, especially from the countries they come from, it rank in unique ways because I like to keep a tally of what films have been in the top of my list and what have been at the bottom. But just because I have this list from the bottom to the top, least like to most like, that's just what it is. What I least like, what all the way to what I feel is the ones that I like the most. It does not necessarily say anything directly about the character of the film because I've had some films where the least like film that I saw I felt was still a strong film, and then there were other years where the least like film I really did not like at all. So I'm just ranking the films what I liked the least all the way to the one I liked the most based on the films that I saw. There might be other films that were at the film festival I never got a chance to see again. It was very limited this year. as it was last year. I'm hoping next year I can get back into the swing of things and see so many films. I did not get a chance to see any of the shorts this year, which I unfortunately regret, but at the same time, too, I'm hoping that I got enough of an experience to know how the film festival as a whole was, because I did like a lot of these films on this list, and there was quite a variety that I went for. So let's check out what films I saw this year. Okay, the first film I'd like to start off with is an Australian film by the name of Friends and Strangers, directed by James Vaughn, starring Amelia Conway, Emma Diaz, and Malcolm Kennard. And this film talks about two upper middle class wanderers in a unique kind of dry comedy where they just decide to explore. They go on a random camping trip together. They end up exploring a different neighborhood. And this couple just recently met too, so this is almost like a first or second date kind of thing. And it just shows how they feel displaced from the world they are, especially in a more contemporary part of Australia. And it's a interesting film because it does have a lot of dry comedy in it, a lot of awkward situations, interesting moments. The film kind of dragged for me a little bit, but at the same time too, I like some of the different unique scenes and kind of the storytelling in it. I did feel for the film though it was something a little different than what I am normally used to. I do find that dry comedy can be a little difficult for me. Now, for some of my friends that are into a lot of the dry comedy and stories and films, I think they're going to really appreciate this one. This is, again, funny in some aspects for them. There were a few things I did find funny, but just for the storytelling, the music popped in and out that fit specific scenes. I did find that the film had its interesting story to tell, especially from the perspectives of each main character. And it's something for those who like dry comedy. I think it would be a good one to check out. The next film on my list is an American film that is a horror thriller, The Beta Test, directed by Jim Cummings and PJ McCabe, starring Jim Cummings himself, Virginia Newcomb, and PJ McCabe. And this is an interesting film because it's a horror comedy thriller, and it's a story about a married Hollywood agent who receives a mysterious letter from an anonymous sender that draws him into a situation where he becomes suspicious of everyone as if a conspiracy is happening. The question is this all in his mind or is there something in the works here? What makes this unique horror and thriller is not only does he receive this mysterious letter, but odd occurrences end up happening, not just in terms of what he's thinking, but it seems like he may or may not be the only one receiving these letters, and who else are they? Now, this plot really like has a theme about data information collecting, which is a key role into it, but I feel the situation for me, the situation seems far out there for the main character. There is a unique twist surprise to the film, but one of the things that remind me about what I saw in the film is, like I said, the characterization seemed to be a little bit more far out there. The situation seemed to be more far out there, but it did give me a little bit of vibes of American Psycho as well, in terms of a lot of those situations are far extreme, but I feel it does play a role in terms of the story they're telling. So, especially if you're looking out for some new horror thrillers, especially with a little bit of comedy, I would really definitely check this film out. The next film I'd like to talk about here is Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy, one of two Japanese films I saw at the Chicago International Film Festival this year. And this film was directed by Ryosuke Hamaguchi, and it stars Aoba, Kawaii, and Hunri. And there are a few other actors as well, but I do want to bring up an interesting thing about this film. So this film is actually a trilogy of films, three different stories that depict three different female characters and the trajectories between their choices and what they regret. There are three different stories in this whole film. Once again, door open wide and magic or something less reassuring. So those are the three stories, and each one has their own unique perspective. Now, in a way, you could look at this as more of a compilation kind of movie, or this is more regarded for horror films where you have three different stories tied in together in one. And in this case, these are just more of drama and romance. I did like a lot of the stories individually themselves, but having them together at times made me feel as if I'm really trying to. It's almost like I'm trying to grab some of what's going on in the first film or story and tying it to the second one. It's one of those films that have their unique stories. If you encapsulate each story individually, you actually get a really good storytelling, really strong drama, well acted film, and you get to see the essence of the story. I think it was hard for me, even though there were breaks in between, having to see those two through because of the fact that you have this film that is encapsulating all three, and they do have some sort of tying in point together, and I'll leave that for you audience members to find it for yourself. And I would do recommend checking out this film. Here we are to a big Hollywood film, which is the next one on my list, Halloween Kills. Of course, you all know this is a U.S. Hollywood film directed by David Gordon Greer, starring Jamie Lee Curtis, Judy Greer, and Andy Mitachek. Mitachek. Um, and just to tell any of you who are not familiar with this is actually part of a trilogy which is a sequel to the original Halloween back in the 70s, the story of Michael Myers the slasher. Now, Halloween Kills is the second in this kind of sequel trilogy, and oops, spoiler alert, Michael Myers is back in Halloween Kills after the Halloween sequel. And in Halloween Kills, it continues on from the rampage that Michael Myers has begun on Halloween night. In this case, you have the main characters headed for the hospital as Laurie Strode is still injured and her family are trying to mend up at the hospital, not knowing that Michael Myers not only has survived the trap that Laurie had set for him, but now is still on the hunt for the family. Meanwhile, the citizens of Haddonfield are out for revenge as they know that it's the anniversary again of the horrific nature and killings back in the 70s, and a lot of them who are survivors from the previous film gather up the citizens together to make sure that they put an end to the legend of Michael Myers once and for all. And this becomes a very unique horror film story because this is the first time you have previous victims of a slasher villain bind together on the hunt for the slasher himself. So not only do you have the killer hunting down his main victims, but now you have citizens on the hunt to kill the killer. I feel I liked the film. It was action packed, and there was a little bit of backstory too to expand on the lore that they want to establish as canon. But at the same time too, I feel that if you're not too familiar with the story, there's a lot of things lacking. It seems like it's just pedal to the metal from the start of the film, and there's no stopping. There's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of chaos going on, and a lot of the times I felt I was watching two separate movies side by side happening. The drama with the citizens of Haddonfield and the fear, and then whatever Michael Myers is doing. So it's one of those films, if you're a huge fan of the Halloween series, I would recommend watching it for, at the very least, continuing the story and see where it leads to. Otherwise, if you're a big slasher film fan, this would be a nice one to have. It's got a decent body count, but at the same time, too, it's one of those. I don't know if you're a fan of just great storytelling or not, but this one just starts right away, pedal to the metal, and just goes 100 miles an hour from there. From one horror movie to the next, here's the next film I'm going to talk about. Another US made Hollywood film, and it's called Broadcast Signal Intrusion. This is another horror thriller directed by Jacob Gentry, starring Harry Shum Jr. of Glee fame, Kelly Mack, Chris Sullivan, and Anthony E. Cabral. And this one is actually a film that stands out to me a little bit because of the fact that this is actually inspired by a real life story. In the late 90s, or in terms of this film, in the late 90s, a video archivist unearths a series of sinister pirate broadcasts and becomes obsessed with uncovering the dark conspiracy behind them. Now, this is based on the video piracy of the 80s and 90s that happened, and one particular one that happened in Chicago, which is still left unsolved today. I believe it was the Max Headstrom piracy, where a news broadcast was hijacked with weird, bizarre videos, which happened twice. And again, to this day, it's still been unsolved. And creating a horror mystery thriller based on this is a very unique thing. What I loved about the film is the suspense continues to grow the deeper he goes into it, but at the same time, too, you don't know what to expect from this film. Is this something supernatural? Is this or something more natural? Is this a conspiracy or is this in someone's head? But in the end, just the suspense building up. What more can you find? It does have an abrupt ending, but it also highlights what, the inspiration of this film was, which was the unsolved mystery of who hijacked a lot of the news reports during those 80s and 90s broadcasts. So if you get a chance, I really do want to recommend this. This is something that's unique, and you can also look up the history online about these broadcast piracy events that happened during that time. So if you get a chance to watch this either in theaters or if you watch it at home on a big screen TV, watch it in the dark and see how far you get with it. The next film here on the list is Paris 13th District. This is directed by Jacques Audiard, starring Lucy Zhang, Noémie Merlant, Makita Samba, and Jenny Beth. And this is a French film, and this talks a story about Emily, who meets Camille, who ends up being attracted to Nora, who crosses paths with Amber. So you've got three women, one guy, friends, sometimes lovers, often both intermixed, and just the complications of relationships that each one of these characters have with each other. I like this drama. It does tell stories from each of the different perspectives of each of the characters, so you get to see where everything's at and get to see the relationships from each person's point of view. I really like this film. Now, this film has interesting tone to it. There's not too much music in it. A lot of it, you can hear the sounds in the background. They like a lot of silence at times. This is a film that I would recommend. There's quite a bit of the film. This film is in black and white, which is also another unique thing. So it's not in any color. It's just in grayscale black and white. And it's very interesting to show the film in that color scheme because of the fact that relationships are not always black and white, and I think it might be a little contrast to the relationships that each of the characters have. So if you get a chance to check it out, especially if you're a fan of French films, this would be a film I would recommend you watching. This is especially important given the fact that Paris 13th District was part of the international competition as well. And this will not be the only international competition film that I saw at the film festival. So for Paris 13th District, do check it out. The next film on my list is Weather, The Weather is Fine from the Philippines. Now, this is one of the highest ranked, this is actually the highest ranked Filipino film I've seen at the Chicago International Film Festival. And this film was directed by Carlo Francisco Manatad, starring Charo Santos Consillo, Daniel Padilla, and Ranz Rifol. And this film is part of the new directors competition, so this is Manatad's first full-length feature film. And this story tells of Miguel, who longs to leave his town and island in Tacloban, uh, with his mother and his friend Andrea after Typhoon Haiyan ravaged the island. And this is actually a true story in terms of the Typhoon Haiyan ripping apart an island in the Philippines, leaving everything in ruins. And I like that this story talks about that event. But on their journey towards getting to the boat to escape Manila, there are many questions that each character has about whether they should leave the island or stay for their own personal reasons. At the beginning, it feels like there's nothing left for them. An island in ruins, people in need, people needing supplies and everything, wanting to escape to one of the other Philippine islands where they can try to recapture the life, at least have a good roof under their head, get away from the damage. And that's what the three main characters' goal is. But throughout the film and through their adventure, in terms of scavenging for supplies, they end up learning more about themselves. And the question is, which one of them actually really wants to leave and which of them doesn't? I like the music montage because there is a lot of singing, which shows a little bit of joy, and singing does seem to be a little bit part of this film itself, which you don't see too often in Filipino films because more it's pop music in the background, but none of the characters really actually singing full songs. But the themes of what each character is looking for is very strong in the film itself, and I feel that this is actually, if you want to see a Filipino film that's not the stereotypical heavily dramatized or over the top comedy, I feel this would be a good film to watch, especially since it is inspired by an actual event that happened in the Philippines itself. Here we are to the next film, and it is Bergman Island, which is an English film directed by Mia Hansen-Love, starring Vicky Krieps, Tim Roth, Mia Wasikowski, and Grace Del Rue. And this film is a unique film, similar to the next film I'll talk about in a bit. It deals with inspiration from other people to create a performance. And this story talks about a couple that's on a retreat on an island that inspired Ingmar Bergman to write screenplays for their upcoming films. And the lines between reality and fiction start to blur as the couple learn more about the filmmaking that Ingrid Bergman has and goes along with a story that they end up trying to tell in a film that they'd like to write. Question is, are things really fiction or are things really becoming reality? I like this deep dive into a film that talks about how films are made, what inspirations there are, and how other filmmakers could use that as their inspiration to create films. I would highly recommend this film, especially if you're into movies about movies, or if you're looking to get into filmmaking. This is a nice film to look. And the number one ranked film in the films that I saw at the Chicago International Film Festival, Japan again reaches the top in this one with an interesting drama. And the film is called Drive My Car. Now, what's interesting, and you're going to hear this from me in terms of why I find this very interesting, the languages in this film are actually many. The primary language, of course, is Japanese because it does take place in Japan, but there is a lot of use of Korean, a lot of use of English, a lot of use of Cantonese, Mandarin, Tagalog, primary language in the Philippines, Indonesia, German, and Malaysian language. And this is going to be very interesting for you to know as I tell you about this film. And this film is another film directed by Ryusuke Hamaguchi, who also directed the film Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy, which I also saw at the film festival. And this film stars Hidetoshi Nishijima and Reika Kirishima. And this story tells of a successful stage director who is married to a screenwriter, and they passionately love each other. After a tragedy occurs, the stage director takes a job directing a multilingual version of Chekhov's Uncle Vanya at a theater festival. There, he has to be driven by an assigned driver, as per the rules of the theater company that hired him. Through his time, he starts to learn more about his wife and also how to forgive himself for all that he blames himself for. One of the things that's unique about this character is he does have one unique control freak kind of personality, and that's how he always drives himself. He's so used to driving his car. Whereas now that he has to follow the rules of this theater company, he has an assigned driver, which gives him more time to reflect. I really like how this film shows the change in the character, the growth in him. And what's very unique as well is being able to see the multilingual show that they do. In the beginning of the movie, when I first saw it, I thought there was something odd about it. I go, I don't understand this. There's a theater production, and at first I thought it was in German, but when he's being responded to by somebody in a different language, it was very jarring to me. It wasn't until later on in the film I understood, oh, this is actually supposed to be a multilingual version of a specific play. You get to see how everything ties together because everything is dealing with understanding people. The way the performance is done in the play is you have characters speaking in a different language, but they all understand each other. They respond to each other in a different language. Especially as you get to the second version of the performance later on in the film, you have a Korean speaking in Cantonese to someone who is also being responded to by somebody in Tagalog, and then another character speaking in Japanese. There's just so much when it comes to the film, and I really like that theme of understanding. It's a very touching film, and it's a film that I feel when you really look deep into it, it really has an important theme, and I love the different ways they highlight that theme through different experiences, different scenes, different character interactions. And I feel that's one of the most important things of this film. So it's the number one film I saw at the Chicago International Film Festival this year. If you get a chance to see it, I highly recommend this film. Again, the film is called Drive My Car. There are subtitles for it. And one thing I will say that's very unique in case you're not experienced with many different languages, when you see the subtitles, if you watch it in Japanese and it's regular subtitles, that the characters are speaking in Japanese. Anything that is in parentheses, that means the characters are speaking in a different foreign language that is not Japanese. So they really engage you in terms of understanding the film, but also letting you know that you've got multiple languages in this. This has been my favorite film at the film festival so far. So those were the films that I saw at the Chicago International Film Festival this year. I did see a lot of quality films. I'm hoping I'm able to fully attend next year. Hopefully everything globally will be a little bit lightened up a little bit. If you get a chance to see any of those films, I do recommend them for different reasons, for specific types of people who like certain type of films. Other than that, that's all I've got for you today. I'm looking forward to doing more of these in the future, and hopefully we'll be able to attend more events and bring more live events to you guys. Again, this is Ian Camalotis for Entertainment Media, and thank you for watching.